Hey guys, welcome to a brand new YouTube video. Today we are going to build this Kaizen Codes blog. Well, you can call it whatever you want to, but I named it Kaizen Codes because you know the channel and everything. So what you'll be using to build this blog is the Nuxt Content module. So what we'll be focusing on today is, as you can see, we have a list of blog posts which is paginatable, pageable, whatever, and you can select by category, and you can also search a post. So let's do 9, and then it'll give me the title, which is 9, and you can clear your search as well. And if no searches are returned, then we show a nice little message. And we can also read the actual blog post. So, and inside your blog post, you can go to the next post, or you can go to the previous post if there was a previous post, and you can go back to the home page. So this is what you'll need for any basic blog. And I'm going to show you how to set up GitHub Actions or a GitHub Workflow to automatically deploy your blog when you finished writing it. So yeah, let's get started. First of all, we're going to have to install some dependencies. So here's a little clip of how I did that. So before we get started, I just want to give a huge shout out to Superdence for sponsoring this video. You can use my discount code if you'd like to check out Superdence. Superdence is a multi-platform bookmark manager in the browser that helps you stay productive. So without further ado, let's get to the video. So to get started, we'll have to install, or just make sure that you have Node.js installed on your computer with checking the version of Node and checking the version of npm. And you can also make sure that you have yarn installed if you want to use yarn. And then we'll use a tool called yarn create to generate this Nuxt app. So you'll type in yarn create Nuxt app and then add a name for your app. What do you want to call your app? This one will be called Nuxt Content Tutorial. And when you press enter, then it will ask you for a project name, which you entered. Select JavaScript, select yarn, and we are going to be using Beautify.js as a front-end framework to help us build this a little bit faster. We're going to add Axios, but you don't need it for this one, and we definitely do need content, so make sure you select content with the spacebar. Select ESLint and Prettier to help you out. You can use Jest for testing, use universal mode, and we are going to select the static/Jamstack hosting, and then add a jsconfig.json if you're not using TypeScript. And select none for continuous integration, or if you do want continuous integration, select something else. And we have to use Git as our version control system. And then after that, your packages would install, and we'll get to what all those packages do for us in a second. Alright, so now that you've installed your dependencies and got the Nuxt Content module in, let's start off by clearing out some of the unnecessary stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all the components. I'm going to delete this hello, or I'll leave the hello post in there. So this content folder is where you'll be writing all your blog posts in the format of Markdown, or there are some other options too, but for this tutorial we are going to be using Markdown. And then the dist folder is fine. Layouts, we can go into the default layout. Let me just minimize this. I'm going to select everything and just make it a h1 saying welcome to my blog. This is just to clean up some of the base code that's been added by Beautify itself, because that's what we used. And then in the pages index, I'm going to just do a over here I'll do the h1 saying welcome to my blog. And in the layouts we'll have to do something else. We're using Beautify, so we have to start with the v app and then use a v main and then a v container and inside this v container we'll add the Nuxt tag, and then in static we'll delete these two. We'll keep the fav icon for now. In the store we'll delete the readme, and in test we'll delete the Nuxt logo spec because that'll fail, and that should be it for cleanup. So let's just save everything and see what happens when we run yarn dev. So you can see when you run yarn dev, it logs a line called passed one file in that amount of time, and that's referring to the markdown file. So every time you write a markdown file and it gets saved, then this will get generated into a special tag that we'll be exploring a little bit later. But it's very fast, and you can create a lot of markdown files and not reduce your compile time too much. So let's see what this looks like. Currently that's what our blog looks like, just welcome to my blog. And we'll work with layout and everything in a bit, but just to make sure that everything works, we know that it's fine. So I'm going to open up a new terminal, and you'll see that I'm on a branch called video base, but you'll probably be on another branch, and you did in your CLI setup you did select your Git, that you did activate your Git repository. So this is a Git repository. So what you need to do is go to GitHub and create a repository and add this as add it as a remote to this one. So if I do git remote, not remove, remote-v, you'll see that my origin resides at this location. So I'm already hooked up to my GitHub, and you just need to make sure to do that if you want to set up these automatic workflows. So next up, what are we going to do? We're going to set up Firebase to be able to deploy our website automatically every time we generate anytime we push to our selected repo, then we'll get automatic deploys. So first of all, what you need to do is you need to run Firebase-v to see if you have the Firebase tools, or is it Firebase /version? Right, so you need to run that to see if you have Firebase installed. If you don't have Firebase installed, you can do npm-i-g Firebase tools at latest, and you'll get the latest Firebase CLI. So what I'm going to do next, if you aren't logged in, you'll have to run Firebase login, but I am already logged in, so it's not needed for me to do that. So what I need to do now is do Firebase, I think Firebase project create, and I think this needs to be projects create, to create a new Firebase project. So I'm going to call this Kaizen blogs dev, because I already have a blogs or Kaizen codes blogs dev, because I already set up the Kaizen codes blogs, and it's actually up right now running the final code. So I'm going to set up a dev one, and what would I like to call this is the development blog, and it'll create your project. This might take a little while depending on your connection and how GCP is performing, so just give it a moment. Right, so our project is created, and what we want to do now is do Firebase init and hosting. So this will allow us to link a project for hosting. So we'll just say yes to proceed, and then we'll use an existing project, and we'll select the project that we've just created. And then for this part where it asks for your public directory, you have to say dist, because that's where Nuxt generates to, and configure as a single page app. No. Do you want to set up automatic builds and deploys with GitHub? So this is a cool part. So I'm going to say yes over here, and I don't want to overwrite the 404 file, and Do I want to overwrite that? Well, no, let's not overwrite that for now. And then it's going to take you to another window or to your Firebase window where you need to authenticate. And if you've successfully authenticated, then you'll see for which GitHub repository would you like to set up a GitHub workflow. And then I'll use this repository, which is the one where this is linked to already. And it's going to ask you which branch you want to set up for workflow. So to which branch, when you push to that branch, it should deploy automatically. So what it's doing now is creating service accounts and creating some secrets and stuff. So do you want to set up a workflow to run a build script before every deploy? So yes. What script would be run before every deploy? So I'm just going to say yarn generate. And this is going to generate some files, but we'll tweak it because it's not really accurate to what should be done, but it at least gives you a base. So the next question is, and I don't know why, but sometimes it gets stuck when I do type in what the command is, but then it never updates it and I have to press enter twice. So that's why we'll also have to update it. So set up automatic deployment to your site's live channel when a PR is merged. So yes. What is the name of the branch? So I'm going to make this video base because my main branch is already linked to another deploy. So that'll be this branch, and then that is configured. So let's go look at what was generated in this file. So you'll see this new file that was generated with Firebase hosting merge and Firebase hosting pull request. And what we'll do with this pull request file is we'll just delete it because we don't need that. We only want to deploy when it's actually merged into the branch. So let's say you have a main branch and you have a development branch and you open up a pull request. It shouldn't then run the deployment. It should wait for the pull request to be merged before deploying. So over here you'll see some, it's a YAML that was generated by them, but there's a few things that we need to change in this YAML. So what we have to do in this YAML file is we have to change up the steps a little bit. So what this is saying is deploy to Firebase hosting on merge. So on push branches video base, and the jobs is build and deploy, and it runs on an Ubuntu instance. And the steps, what I like to do is just name my steps a little bit better. So this is fine. We use this action / checkout, and then for this run, I'm going to put it on a new line and then just call this name, and I'll call this, what did I call this? So first of all, for this one, we'll do yarn generate. But because we need yarn, we'll have to install some dependencies as well. So I think yarn is available in this, but let's just do in run, we'll do yarn generate, which is the actual command. So I guess we can change this just to make it a bit generate site, and then this is what we call it, and this is the actual command that's being run. But before we do that, because yarn generate is using Nuxt, we first need to define a installation file. So install deps, and then we can just do run yarn, which will install the dependencies. And then in this one, we have Firebase, but what we'll do is we'll put this on a new line, and then we can just say name is deploy site. So we'll install the dependencies, we'll generate the site, and we'll deploy it to Firebase. And this is all you need for your deployment to be ready. Once you push to the actual branch, then your site will deploy. And we'll test that out in a minute. Just make sure that the branch over here is the one that you actually want to deploy when pushing to that branch. So let's have a look at where the site is now. So we can go back to our actual site, which looks like this. So if we run git add, git commit, and git push to this branch, then we should be able to see this website on a Firebase URL. So let's do that. Let's go to video base, we'll git add, we'll git commit, and we'll say init base project. And then we'll do git push. So this will take a while to run in the GitHub actions, and while that's running, I'll just keep going along until it's finished. Alright, so the next step is to prettify the site a little bit, and what it looks like right now is this. So we're going to do some styling changes just to have it look a little bit better. So we'll start out with the default page, and we want to add a nav up here soon, but we'll do that in a component. And in the rest of the page, we'll add a vmain and then a vcontainer with the Nuxt tag, but instead of placing it directly in the container, what we're going to do is we're going to add a vrow, and inside this vrow we'll add columns, vcol, and we'll do cols equals, I'm just going to copy some of this. So what this is saying, columns 12 means that initially any screen size below small, it's going to be 12 columns, and as soon as it reaches medium, then it's going to go to 10 columns. And then we'll put our Nuxt tag inside of that, and I'll explain why in a second. And then for the column after that, what we're going to do is we're going to say vcol, and then the columns for this would be 12 as well, and in medium it will only, or from medium and up, it will be 2. So the reason I will put this over here is because this you could use for ads or side content or anything like that to monetize your site. So usually you'll see on the right hand side of a page there's some ads or something like that. So this is just to keep in mind that blogs are built for the purpose of making some money, and we're building this one completely free, so you don't even spend any money on this except some time and maybe a like on this video, maybe a subscribe, but that's all you have to pay to build and deploy your own blog. So if we save this page and we go back to our site, you'll see that the default layout needs to have a name. So what we'll call this is so that's just ESLint being a little bit, so we'll call this the home layout. Oh, we'll call this the default layout. And then in our pages, we'll have to tell it explicitly that the layout it's using is the default layout. So now when we go back to our site, we should also update the name of our page. So we'll do the name of the page would be homepage, and then hopefully by now we can see our website. So welcome to my blog. It doesn't look much different, but if we inspect this and we hover, you'll see that there's a columns of 10, and over on this side there's columns of 2. So this, as long as the content goes down or there's something in here, this column would extend down this way up until a certain point where the column won't be there anymore, and it would be a full width website. So then you can use like mobile ads or something like that with Google AdSense if you are using ads. Right, so for the next step, what do we want to do? We want to design our home page. So the home page is usually just a collection of all the different posts that have been written and that have been pulled from the content folder. But in our case, we're just going to design the page first without thinking about you know, pulling the data. We'll get to that in a little bit. So for the home page, let's go to, I'm just using a reference screen so that I don't forget what I did. So for the home page, we want a nav bar, which is actually in the layout. So maybe we should start with creating the nav bar first, and we'll do this in components. We'll create a new file called the navigation.view, and then make it a view component. We need to give it a name called the navigation. And then, so in the navigation, we are going to add a VApp bar, which is a view component, and we need to set a max height of 64 pixels so that it doesn't span too far. And then in the VApp bar, I'm going to add a div which will have a class of search, and let me just do that. And then I want to make this a flex container, so I'll do deflex, and I'll align everything center, and I'll also do a justify end, because what I want to do in this div is to add the search box. So I'm going to add a ML auto to move it over to the right, and then inside here we're going to use the vText field. This is a Viewtify component, and we don't need two. We can just automatically close it over here. And then in this vText field, we want to add a few props. So it has to model a data property. So we're going to model search, and search would be just a normal data property for now. We'll work with reactive data in and out of the components in a little while, but for now, just to get it all started, we'll do search. So this value of this text field would always fill this value, and we can add a hide details of auto, because Viewtify adds like this weird margin padding thing that I don't really enjoy, and I want to give it a dense class to make it a little bit more dense, and then add a placeholder that just says search for a post. And we can also prepend an icon, which would be MDI magnify, and this is built into Viewtify to just use MDI plus some keyword that renders a icon, and you can check that out on material design icons. And I want to make it outlined, and I also want to append an icon, but this icon should only be appended if there's a value inside the search box. So I'm going to do if search.length. So if there's actually some characters, then I'll add the MDI close, which is going to be a X. Else, I'm just going to add nothing. So what this is going to do is when you type, it's going to show a little X so that you can clear out the search form. So, and then I'm going to add click append. So what happens when I click on that icon, then what I want to do is clear the search. And how do we clear the search? We do that with a method, and this method would be called clear search. And all it does is it says this.search equals nothing. So it resets the search box. And that should do it for our navigation for now. Let me just add some content back in here. And then back in the default, we want to add our navigation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the navigation and save that. Let's see if we have any errors. Ah, there we go. So now you can see if I type, let's say test, we do not get a icon. So we have to see why that is happening. So let's go to the navigation, open icon, if search.length, MDI close, else nothing. This looks fine to me, but probably missing something. Let's try refreshing, that usually helps. No icon. All right, so let's see if we have any browser errors, console errors. So it's telling me that clear search is not defined. So you guys probably spotted that. Oh, methods, not method, methods, multiple, plural. Okay, so let's go back to this and refresh and do test, and now you can see we get a nice X, and if we click it, it clears out the search. So that what I want to make this search do is as you type, it actually keeps searching instead of having to press enter or something, and as soon as you clear it, then it will empty out the search query. And we'll get to that in a little while. So that's it for the navigation, and now we can get started with the actual home page. So the home page is a little bit of more code, but I'm going to type it all out so that I can explain how I'm going and not just copy and paste it, because I know when I watch videos I want to see them actually type it out, and you guys can let me know in the comments if you want to see me type it out or prefer me to just paste stuff in and then talk about the logic. So we're going to add a v container, but I'll add a fluid tag to this because remember in the default view there's already a container and we're inside a 12 column row, 12 column inside a row. So if I add another container, it's going to add more padding, which I don't want, so I'll just add the fluid property, but I do want the container there so that I can use vrow and vcols and stuff. So inside the container, the first the first tag would be just a div, and I'm going to call this intro, and I'm going to give it a margin y of 5 and a margin bottom of 8. So I guess this could just be margin top, just not to be redundant. And the purpose of this div is just to introduce the blog. So we'll do an h1, not a HQ, and this h1 will have a class of text h1, and we'll say Kaizen codes, if I can type, Kaizen codes blog, and below that we'll have an h2 for a subtitle, and we'll just give it some margin to the top, and we'll say 100x your Nuxt.js skills. And then let me add an emoji, but I'll show you something weird that has been happening recently. So I'll save this, and then if we go to the site, you'll see that my emoji looks messed up, and that's been happening in Chrome recently. So what I'll do is I'll wrap this emoji in a span, and the span will have a class of emoji, and I'll keep doing that for a lot of emojis. So what I'm going to do in assets is I'll add a styles.css file or SCSS file, and then I'm just going to define emoji and say that it should have a font weight of 100 because that's what's causing the issue. And then in Nuxt.config.js under the CSS property we'll add /assets styles and .scss. And then if we look at our page now, you'll see that our emoji is back to being beautiful. So what's next? We have our intro. So the next thing is I'm gonna just do a placeholder for where I think the content will go. So we can create a new div, and we'll call this, well, we have to create a vrow because we want to do some columning stuff, but we'll give this a class of posts container, and then inside this row we'll create some columns. So we'll do a vcol of calls of 12, and the purpose of this column would be to add a filter. So the original site has a little drop down where you can select categories, so we'll add this filter inside of this column which is spanning the full width. So we'll do div.filter, and then in here we'll do a vselect, and this vselect will be self-containing, I believe. We don't need slots or anything, so we can make that self-containing. And for the vselect we want to model category, which doesn't exist yet, but we'll create that soon. And we'll also do a style of width of 100, pixel. Don't want it to be bigger than that. I'll also do outlined, and I'll also do dense, and I'll also do hide details auto to remove that nasty padding thing, and then add some fake items for now, just to have some options. So we'll do all, oops, that has to be single quotes. We'll do all, we'll do coding, and we'll do YouTube, I guess. And then we have to create this category. So over here we'll do data category, and whatever this value is, it will make that the default value of the select. So now we've created this post container which has a filter in it. So let's see what that looks like. So there's our little filter. So now we can select whatever category we want, but obviously it's not doing anything right now. So the next step is to actually put the content in there. So what I'll do is not create a new row, but actually just create a new column. So the column would be basically an area where the little postcards are. So I'll do a vcol, and then for now we'll just do a fake v4 of posts. I mean a post in, let's say 12, or let's just do 4 for now, and then we need to give this a key which can be post, and basically what this is doing is just creating 4 columns. Now there's no data in post, so this is just a number, so it'll go 0 1 2 3, so the key is 0 1 2 3. And then inside this we first need to add some classes. So I want this to be no, it doesn't need to be classes, it needs to be calls. So I wanted this to be 12 columns on mobile, and then anything that's like medium and up, it can be just half the screen. So then we'll have 2 cards up until like a certain point, and then it'll snap to 1 card. So that's fine. And then in the post we will create a V card, and the V card will have an elevation of 0 because I don't like the hovering border effect thing, and a V card title. And by the way, this is all just markup, so you can do whatever you want here, but this, if you follow along with this, you'll know where to change up some of the stuff. So my first blog, and V card text would be a, let's just do lorem 20. Nice image shortcut to create some fake text. Nope, we need to press enter. Save that. Don't scroll, please. And that should be okay. But we also want to have vcard actions. So we need to go read the post. And in here we'll have a V button. But it's just going to be a text button that says read more. And for now we'll add a to property, but this to would just be a /. So no, just a / and a fake ID. So that's going to be a fake slug of 1. And there we go. So we have a V button text 2 equals 1/1, and then finally we will create a new row, and this row's purpose would be to have pagination on the page. So we'll add a class of post pagination, and in here we'll have a vcol, and this needs to be calls of 12, and the class needs to be text right because I want it to be on the right side. And inside here we can do 2 buttons. I'm actually just gonna copy and paste this because it's quite boring. So the buttons would have a button with an icon inside the button, and I'm going to make it small, and that icon's name you put in there, then it will render that. So it's a previous and a next button, and then we can save that. And so that would be it for our homepage design. So let's have a look, and then you can see we have fake posts which looks almost identical to the real page. We have next buttons, we have previous buttons, but they don't do anything now. We have like a search input, and that gives us like the basic layout. So now what we want to do is, if we go over here, it's going to say 404 not found because we don't have a page for that. So let's create this page where the posts would actually show. So to do this, we're going to create a dynamic route, and the way you do that is you put an underscore, and then I'm going to call it slug, but you can call it anything you want to, but you reference the name in the param by what you put after the underscore. So slug makes a little bit sense, and you'll see why later. So I'll do a view instance, and then for this page it's going to be quite simple. Because it's a full page, we need to add a v container again with fluid. So it's also going to use the same, before I forget this again, it's also going to use the same layout and have a different name. And that's a nice thing, we can reuse our layout now. What did I call this? Default layout. So we can save that, and then inside this v container what we want to add is a section, and the section is going to have a class of margin y of 3, so top and bottom, and then I'm going to add some button over here, and this button will just take us back home. It has a text saying go back and an arrow going left with a v icon and some margin on it. So if we save that, this page shouldn't look like much yet, but we can check it out. So if we go read more, we have a go back button. So we can go back and forth from our page, or from our post page to our all posts page, I guess. So now what we need to do next is just have a section for the actual data. But this is going to be placeholder data for now until we actually physically pull the posts from content. So we'll have a section, and I'm going to call this post content. And in post content we'll have a header, oh let's say my first post, and a p tag. Let's do lorem 500. Save that. And let's just add some random break over somewhere, otherwise the text would be a little bit too cluttered. So let's add a break over here. Let's add 2 breaks, and maybe 1 over here. So now we have 3 columns of data, or of content, and we can look at that. So this is what our post looks like. Very boring. It looks like a just a normal sort of article, especially because it's in Latin. It feels a little bit academic-y. So finally what we want to do is we're just going to add another row, and I'm going to copy this again. We're going to add this row at the bottom, which would also be pagination. So it's just a button that says previous post and a button that says next post. It's flex. There's space between the buttons, so it's on the sides. They align center, they have a margin at the top, and they span the full row. So if we go back to our application, we can see that we have previous post and next post. So that's basically the layout for our application, which means we can actually start building in some physical logic. So let's get to that. All right, before we get started with actually pulling in our posts, let's talk about creating posts for a little bit. So in your content folder in the root directory, you'll see this markdown file. And in the markdown file, you'll see these 3 lines and a title, a description, and after those 3 lines, you'll see content. So if you don't know much about Markdown, I suggest you go check out how to write Markdown. It's pretty cool. And we also get a Markdown preview enhanced, so you can actually quickly see what you're busy writing as you write it. This is an extension that I installed called Markdown Preview Enhanced. So it shows you your content while you write it, because it's not easy to see really like what you'll be writing. But there are some cool things that you can do, like let's say let's add 3 tags and call it JS and say require.env.config. You'll see it gives some syntax highlighting, but this syntax highlighting would be a little bit different in the actual post. So I'll make another video on actually writing content, but the point of this video is just to get your blog up and running. So what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is just create some fake posts and use those. So I'll probably speed through this. So I actually want to talk about these 3 tags a little bit. So whenever you write a post, you can use some metadata by adding a title over here. So let's say getting started with Nuxt.js Content, and a description you can add, call it Nuxt, or take your blogging to a next level with this tutorial. And you saw me add a category dropdown, and the way that works is I'm going to add a category tag over here, and then I'll call this coding, and you'll see how we'll pull this into the data and actually use it in the dropdown. And we can also, for now, just add some tags. We won't be using tags in this video, but maybe in the future when I actually do update my blog or use it, then I can use these tags. JavaScript tutorial, and I think that would be okay for now. So you can add a few properties here, and I encourage you to go check out the Nuxt Content site to see what this is about. And then what I like to do here is start writing some content. So let me just generate some fake content quickly. Well, I'll just use this because I don't feel like writing stuff now. And then getting started, we can paste that over there. And in Nuxt Content, you have this cool tag that's called the excerpt tag. So if I add this tag and put more over here, then whatever I wrote above this, so this part would be put into an excerpt, and you can use it in your code on the components. All right, we're back. I just had a quick meal, and I actually forgot that I did do a test deploy earlier on when I pushed the code, and that has finished. So if you remember when I pushed it, it was just in the beginning when there was nothing on the page. So this is what it looks like. So this is the URL that I generated, and you can point your domain to that later if you want to, not to mine, but to yours that it deployed to, and you can see that the deploy went successful. So now every time we push to the branch that we selected, then the app will deploy, or the blog would deploy. So where were we? We created an excerpt for the posts, and whatever you add after the excerpts. So let's do a title like this, and we can just say getting started, and I'm going to be lazy and just add this again. How to do it, and add that again. So we have one post. So I'm going to add a few more posts and then get back to the video. All right, so I've created a few posts. You can see I named a few of them 8th, 9th, 10th, and there are some things with just simpler names. And what I've done is a few of these I copied and pasted, which was actually a mistake because then it created all of them at the same time. Because content creates a property on your post, created at and updated at, and that is actually based on the file itself. So it reads the file's data, like when the file was created and when it was modified, and then it creates that property for you in your code. So some of them I created after the fact, this 8th, 9th, 10th, and the writer's block was the 11th, and then I'm quitting was the 12th post. And I put this in the title, so when we do sorting and filtering and stuff, we'll be able to see that it actually is in order, but some of them might be a little bit out of order because I created them at exactly the same time, maybe a few milliseconds apart. Anyway, so we do have some data now. So this is how we write data, and if you want to explore this a bit deeper, you can go to the Nuxt.js Content website to see how to write Markdown, and you can get cool syntax highlighting. So we'll add a syntax highlighting in this last post. We'll do a JS and we'll say async function quit await quitting. Yeah, let's just do that. And you can probably also do something like bash npm install restart project, and we'll see how this renders in Nuxt Content. So we have a few posts in the content, and this is just the basic structure, so you can just keep adding posts here, but you can also add routes, like let's do, for instance, like articles / a post, but you can explore that in deeper level, and I might actually continue making more videos on this blog. For now, I just want to get the most simple blog out there and deployed, and then we can keep building on this in further videos. So the next step is to actually fetch this data and see it on the page. So let's do that next. All right, so at this moment we are back inside the index folder, and what we'll do now is fetch the data. So I'm going to leave the data property there, and above that I'm going to create async data. And this runs on the server side of Nuxt, so when you run generate, then it would compile this in the generation process and actually generate all your pages for you. So this is like you're on the server, but we're using Nuxt in static mode, so it will just generate the pages. What I want to do over here is define a few things. So async data allows us to return some data into the view. So first of all, I want to give a limit to what we can fetch. So the limit would be 5 posts. I only want to fetch 5 posts, but you'll see that we actually will only have 4 in view on the actual page. And this is a trick that I'm using to sort of emulate pagination, because I'm thinking a little bit ahead. And imagine for a second if your blog grows and you boom and you have 5 writers or 10 writers or 100 writers, and you start just generating more and more and more content. You could just fetch all your posts here and create sort of front-end navigation, but a more efficient thing to do is just to fetch a few posts at a time and navigate through that so that you don't have to overload your memory with a bunch of posts. And there is some tricks and tips that I can give you on how to paginate your pages, and that's what we'll be doing. So we'll start the page as well on page 1. And then what we want to do is we want to fetch the post. So we'll call this variable fetched posts. And because we're in async data, we don't have access to this instance, so we have to get everything from the context. And in the context, we have a property called content. So content is provided by the content module, the Nuxt.js Content module. And this is what allows us to fetch pages and paginate them and everything. So what we want to do over here is await content, just like that, and then dot limit by the limit, and we want to sort by the created at. So we'll do this property is what we want to sort it at, and we want to do it descending. So descending means the newest post would always be on top. And then what we want to do is we want to skip. And what we have to do here is say the limit -1 times the page -1. And what that's saying is, okay, so the limit is 5, and we want to skip 4 and times it with the page -1. So if page is 1, this would be 0. So we skip 4 posts. That means we fetch after the fourth post we start fetching again. And that's because we are fetching, technically we are fetching 5 because we're limiting to 5, but we're going to have a trick where we sort of slice one out of the array in order to be able to know whether we are at the last post. So if this page is 2, then we'll have page minus 1 would be 1, and we'll multiply that with 4, so we'll skip 8. So that means the page is 2, we'll skip 8. If we go to the third page, we'll have the right amount because we've skipped the first 8. And then what we need to do is we have to say fetch, and now we can do a check. We can say next page equals if the fetched posts dot length is equal to the limit, which means that if we fetched this page and we have 5 items on the page, that means that there's a possibility that the next page would have more. But if it has less than 5, it means that that was the last piece of data, so there is no next page. But there's also the possibility that you have, let's say, exactly 15 posts. So it could be 5, 5, 5, so the next page would be empty. So the way to overcome that is we can do the posts is equal to, if there is a next page, we do fetched posts dot slice 0 minus 1. And what this basically does is it returns all the elements except the last one. Is that correct? No, it returns all the elements except the first one. So if it's the next page, or yeah, if there is next page, which means we'll have 5 posts on there, we'll only take the first 4. I mean the last 4. The first 4, yeah, and then we'll move the last one over to the next page. So then we know that it doesn't matter if we have the exact amount of page or posts, the last page will never have that amount. It will always either have 1 or just below 5. Otherwise, we just want to return the fetched posts, which means that there's less than a limit, so the last page we've reached it. And then what we can do here is we return some values to be able to access them. So we return the page, we return the limit, and we return the posts, and we return whether or not this is next page. So this would be available in the view instance now. And this should be page, not path. So now we have our posts, our next page. So what we can do now, before doing any fetch next stuff, we can look at the UI. So let's go back up to what we created over here. Instead of looping through 4, we are going to loop through posts. The key would be the post. Let's do .slug because that's a property that is available. And I guess let me log posts over here. Let me rather do it and mount it so we see it in the browser console. Otherwise, it would be in the VS Code console. Console.log this.posts. So at the moment we are looping over them, but we'll still have this boilerplate data. So let's look at the blog. You can do F12. Let's refresh. And content.limit is not a function. That makes sense. So this should be limit. Typo errors, it's late. Refresh. All right. So now you can see when the page mounted, I got these logs. And these logs are saying that we have 4 posts, which is what we want because we know there are more than 5. So we've cut 1 out. And you can see that each post has a body, which is an object and basically split up into children and types and stuff. It has a created at property. It has the description that we gave it. It has the path of where we're going to view this. It has the slug. It has the tags. It has the title, the table of contents, which I will get to in another video, which you can use as sort of a menu of what's on the page. Updated at the extension, the excerpt, which I told you, and the excerpt is also a body object, so we will use this in a special way. And then the directory where it's stored. So if you stored your posts in /article/something.md, then that dir would be /articles. and then the category that we gave it. So that's what the posts look like. We go back to the code, we can remove that console.log. And now we can look at the content. So what we want to do for each of those posts is we want to make the title the post.title, and the text, what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to say the Nuxt Content. So this is a special tag provided by Nuxt Content, and this is how we use excerpt, and this is also how you use showing actual posts in a on a page. So you can give the Nuxt Content, and it'll show you. You can give it the entire body, and then it'll show you the content of the post. So, but for now we just want the excerpt. So what we're going to do is give it a prop of document, which is an object, and this receives a body, and that would be the page.excerpt. Because as you saw in the console.log, the excerpt is the same as the body. So if we pass the entire page in here, it's going to print the entire MD file, but we only want to show the excerpt that we created at the top of that MD file, this piece that comes right before this more, and there has to be no spaces, everything lowercase. So this is what we should see in the description of the post. So that's body.excerpt, page should be post.excerpt. And then for read more, what do we want to do? We want to go to the post.path. So if we click that read more, it should take us to the actual post.path. And this should render our posts. So let's have a look. And now you can, oh, this is the wrong one. So now you can see we have 0 posts on the page because we made it intact. Posts is not defined. Oh, this is because I need to refresh. All right. So you can see we have descending order. This was the 12th post I created. This was the 11th. This was the 10th. This was the 9th. And then there should be some of them that I didn't number. Oh, and next and previous doesn't work yet because we haven't implemented that. So let's do that. But the first piece is sort of what we expected. We got four posts, and if we click this, it should take us to #I'm quitting. But this is still not the correct content. So let's go back, and if you take 11, you see the different slug, and that's working as expected. So let's finish off this pagination. So what we want to do when we click this button is we basically want to do the same thing, fetch posts, but skip a different amount based on the page and the limit. And we'll create methods for that. So we can go to methods, and then I'm going to create a sort of global method for fetching, which will just help so we don't duplicate code. So fetch post does basically the same thing as what we did in async. So we get the fetched posts equals await. Now we have to use this .content because we can use it in methods. Then .limit, and what do we want to limit it to? We want to limit it to this .limit, and we want to sort by the created at property. And we want to do that descending, and then we want to skip exactly the same as we had in our initial method. So now we have to use this .limit -1, and here we have to use this .page -1, and then we can fetch that. So this should return the next amount, but this .page hasn't changed yet. So this we won't call directly from the buttons. We'll call 2 different methods, and we'll have to manipulate this .page before calling this. So I'll show you how to do that. So after this, we just have to do this exact same thing over here, where we say the next page is only if the fetch post.length is equal to this .limit. And then we have the post, which is next page, fetch post.slice, which is this, and then otherwise be the fetch post. So now we can do this .posts is equal to posts. So what we're doing now is we're saving a lot of memory. Instead of, so this .posts is now actually like a memory space. And if we keep fetching just all the posts, and we keep writing posts and keep fetching, this .posts will just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and might cause, you know, inefficiencies. It will take a while to get there, but now you never have to worry about that. So we can save this and then create the actual pagination methods. So we'll do fetch next, and we'll do fetch previous. So for fetch next, what we want to do is first we want to say this.page plus equals 1 so that we increment the page, and then we can call this.fetch posts, or we have to await that, await this.fetch posts. And then we can do exactly the same for previous. First we have to make the page one less, and we have to say this.fetch posts. So that's basically what we need to do for paginating. Let's see if this works. I have to refresh, and you can see if I click next, nothing happens because we did something wrong. Oh, right, we didn't do something wrong. We're never calling the methods on the button. So on this button at click, we have to say fetch next, and on this, no, this has to be fetch previous, and on this one we'll say fetch next, and on this one we'll say fetch previous. So now we should be paginating, and you can see we have 8, 7, and then post 3, but this is where things got a little bit because I created these at the same time, and then this is the last post supposed to be. And then now you can see we keep going next, next, next. So we have to do something to fix that. And how do we do that? On this button we say disabled if there's no next page. And this, or you could hide the button, but I prefer having it there and just disabling it. And this disabled is pretty much, sorry, this has to be over here at next. So we can't go next if we don't have a next page. When can't we go previous? We can't go previous when we are on the first page. So we can just say page equals 1. So if we're on the first page, we don't want to go back. So we can go back to the app now and go previous, previous, and you'll see this is the first page. 12 post. Next, next, nope, next, next. And that also didn't work because in fetched posts in the methods, we shouldn't say const next page. We should actually manipulate the current next page. So we should say this.next page and this.next page. We can save that. Let's try again. So we can go next, next, and now we can't go next anymore, but we can go previous, previous, next, next. So that's perfect. It's kind of a bummer that we have 12 posts exactly, so it's 3 exact pages, but you get the gist. Let's add a 13th just to prove a point. So let's create a new one. 13th post. .md, and what I'll do is just be lazy, copy all this, C, B, and then 13th, and it's also coding. So now we can go back to the app. We go next, next, there should be another next because we have a new post, and next we only have 1 post. So you can think about redesigning this, or like not making these buttons jump up and down, but this is just to get things flowing, like I said. And what would be nice is to see a actual date on these cards so that we know when they've been created. So let's go back to the index and go to our card. Let's minimize this, and below vcard title we can do a vcard subtitle, and in the vcard subtitle what we'll do is we're going to say a new intel.date time format. I want to do it en US. I'm going to be tricky over here and just do, let me copy this because I think this is exactly what I did. Yes, you don't need to do this. You could do date style short and time style short. This will work. Let's have a look at it. We have to format that dot format with what property? A new date of the post dot created at, and then we can check it out. So now you should see this, but I want to see the seconds as well, and I don't really know how to do that, so I'm just gonna go full on bad code and do that. So now you can see that there's seconds as well. So it's 8 o'clock 21 and shows you all those details. And you can make a 24-hour format as well. Why not? How do I do that again? You know what? Let's not do that. I completely forgot. Okay. So now we have some time on there. What's the next step to this? We have the read more. We can view this, and so I guess we're fetching all the data correctly. All we have to do now is also fetch the data on this page. So let's get into that. Alright, so to update that page we need to go to slug, and we can remove all this placeholder stuff, and I'll replace this h1 with an h2 to not have it too big, and also just because I want to use text h2. And then over here, what do we use for the title? So that's a good question. Basically we have to do the same thing here, but we only need to fetch one post. So we can do async data, and we can add the content, we can add an error, and I think we need the params as well. So for params, params is what we'll use to find the slug. So the params is what the page was sent with. So this name that you gave after the underscore, you'll access it through params dot. So params dot slug or params dot id or whatever you named that. And what Nuxt is doing is when you go to the route / something, then that gets stored in that params variable. So first of all, we need to remember that we also want to paginate posts here, but only next and previous. But we'll do that just now. So let's do to do. Firstly, we want to get just the plain post data. So we'll do the same thing. We'll say const post equals await content. And now we actually pass the slug, which will be in params.slug, and then we can just fetch that. So now we have a content, and we're using this params.slug to tell content we only want that one post, and you can fetch that for us. And what we also want to do is we want to add a catch. If there's an error, what we'll do is we'll just return the Nuxt error, which is this context property, and we can say status code is 404, and the message is oops, looks like that does not exist. So we're throwing a 404 error for Nuxt. And now we have a post, so what we need to do now is just return the post. And if we have the post, now we can use post.title, and below that we can do a so this is where it gets interesting. So now we can do, let's just add some margin to this. Now we can do the Nuxt tag again, so Nuxt Content tag. But this time we're not going to use it just for the excerpt, we're going to use it for the entire document. So we'll just feed this thing the post just like that without any object or anything like that. And this is basically where the entire code for our post. So all of the other stuff that I did is basically just fluff around this. All you really need is to fetch your post and put it in this Nuxt content, and it will render on the page. But we want to do something a little bit more fancy, so that's why I'm taking it a step further. So let's save that and then check it out on the page. Let's go to 13th, read more. You can see this post was created 13th, and we're actually getting some data. So if we go to the 12th post, because I remember we added some code, you can see that it actually highlights that code for us. So you can write some nice blogging tutorials, and there's a lot of plugins that you can use to make your code look prettier and even match your VS Code theme and all those kinds of things. And like I said, I plan on doing more videos just around this one blog. So leave a comment below if you think that's something that I should do. Next up, we need to do next post and previous post. So instead of going back from, like, let's say 13th, and I want to go to 12th, I don't want to go out and go back in. I just want to scroll through the available posts. So let's do that. And that's what we're going to do over here. So content has a nice way of doing that. So I'm going to destructure previous and next from await content without params dot, let's look at this. Oh yeah, dot only. So we really only need the path. So you use only to tell it that you can remove all the other properties, just give me the path, save some memory, don't have to store all that data. Dot only path dot sort by the created at, and also descending. So that this has to match your sorting of your actual posts, so that it fetches the same sort of data, but it's not fetching everything, it's just fetching the current one, the previous one, and the next one. And all we want is the previous and the next one. And the way we do that is tell it to surround itself on the params.slug. So it's going to give everything surrounding. So these values could be null as well. So we have to make sure that they aren't null in the code above. But for now, let's just fetch it. And then we can return previous and next over here. And previous and next would basically just be objects with the path of the previous and next post. So what we want to do here is just say on the previous post, we want to go to previous and previous.path. So what this is saying is, if there's a previous, then give me previous.path, and the same for next. Otherwise this will fail because you can't access path on a null object. So let's do next.path, and then just to make it a bit visually better, we can say disabled equals if there's no previous, and also disabled if there is no next. So if next is null or previous is null, then we don't care. We don't want to go anywhere, we'll just read what we have. So let's go to 13th, and you'll see we can't go to previous because we disabled it, but we should be able to go to 12th post, we should be able to go to 11th post, back to 12, back to 13th, and no further. So if we skip through everything, 9, 8, 7, there's a few copies. Eventually we should get to a post that doesn't have a next post. So there we go. This was the first post that I ever wrote, was the getting started with Nuxt. And if we go back, then we are back in the normal posts. So yeah, that's basically how we fetch data and put it on the page with some pagination. Next up, let's do the searching and also adding the tags, the categories to this page. Alright, so let's get into searching. First of all, we have to go to the search area, which is in the navigation. And on this, we already have this search thing that we're modeling when we type anything into this text field. But what we really want to do is we want to have the whole app know if there's a search query, because the index page isn't aware of this navigation. So I can't access search from there. And this is a good time to bring in the Vuex store. So we could have used the Vuex store for everything, fetching posts and saving posts in the store, having it available around the whole app. But because this is a simple 2-page app, it's not really critical to do that. But as I make more videos, I might move over more stuff to the store. But this is something that I think is warranted. So in order to create a store, you just have to go to your store folder, create an index.js, and then the only required thing is a function that returns an object, and that's it. Now you have a store. So now you can, what I want to do over here is just say query, which is empty at first. And we also need a way to set this. And we always have to mutate state with a mutation. Mutations equals just normal object is fine. And then I'm going to say set query and give it the state and a payload. And what we want to do is state.query equals the payload. So now we have a way to set and fetch the search query. So what we do in the navigation is we can keep this as search, but we move it out of data. We can delete the data and make it a computed property. So now search becomes a computed property, which has a getter. And what does this return? It returns this.store .state.query .query, and when it sets, it gets a value, and this is coming from the input itself. It knows to use get and set. So when it's reading from this, and when it's setting to this. So what we want to do then is this.store.commit, and what do we want to commit? Set query, which we defined, and we just want to give it this value. And that's it. To clear search, we don't do this .search equals that anymore. We have to do, we can do that because I think Vue knows when you set a local computed property with an equal sign, it will use this. But I'm not going to risk it for the biscuit. I'll just do it explicitly. So then whatever's read from here would be based on what is being set here. So that's how we can set the query. And then lastly, what we need to do is we need to see this query in our pages. So when we're searching, and also we don't really, it doesn't make sense to search on the post page, because if you search in the post page, you might need a pop-up to show other posts. But in this app, we'll only search on the actual index page where there are already posts available. So let's go to the index page. And first of all, in this one, we have to hide this. So we can say vif only show if the current route dot name equals index. So this is probably not the best way to do this because yeah, but it will work, I hope. So let's check it out. Oh yes, in the store we have to export these values for Nuxt to receive them. Alright, so now we have a search, but if we go to a post, then search disappears because the route is an index. So we can only search on the actual pages post, on the posts page. Alright, so next up we go to the index, and now we have access to the search query. And where that becomes prominent is when the search query changes. Whenever it changes, then we want to fetch the post again with that query. So let's update our query, and this would only be on the client side. So we don't need to update the async data because this happens when we generate, but this will only happen in the client side of when you actually physically type something in the search. You could add probably something in the URL like a $Q equals to pre-search something so that when you refresh the page then your search is still there, but we'll just do it as like in the app itself. So in the where were we? Oh yeah, so we first need a place to access this search query. So what are we going to do? We're going to create a new computed property search query which returns this .store.state.query. And what we want to do is watch this computed property. If it changes, we want to do something. So we'll create a watcher. And what we're going to watch is the search query. And it's going to have a new value when it updates. And once that updates, all we want to do is we're going to say this.fetch posts again. But this time we want to give it this value. But currently fetch posts doesn't accept the value. So we need to go to fetch posts and just give it a query, which always equals an empty string unless something is given to it. And this is quite useful because content knows that if it's an empty string, it'll just match everything. So it doesn't change our original query if it's empty. So now we can use this query inside here. And the way we do that is we have to do some trickery on this fetch. So we need to create a base fetch. So what we do is we'll say let base fetch. Everything stays the same, but we have to conditionally render something depending on whether there is a value or not. But this is actually more related to categories. So for now let's just do this. We can figure that out when we get to categories. And then all we really have to do here is after sort by, we can just say .search and then give it the query. So it magically knows that whatever query is in there, it will do a full text search on your post. And then what we are doing is we're fetching posts based on that full text search and only returning posts that match that. So let's look at how that behaves. So let's say we have 12 posts now, and let's do enter 12th over here. But we first need to make sure that we're getting all the data. Let's go back to our navigation. The text field is modeling search, set value, this.store.commit set query, set query, state payload, state.query equals that. And then in the index, we have search query, which is returning this.store.state.query. And whenever that changes, we are fetching new post based on that query. So maybe that query that I entered just basically matched everything. So let me add X. There you can see, so nothing has the letter X in it. So that's the thing with the fuzzy search, like it's looking at 12 and almost everything is matching it. So let's do any more. So you can see any matches can't do this anymore. There was one about ideas. There was one about, let's see what else we have. Let's do awesome. And that doesn't match anything up because we're not resetting the pagination. So pagination is on the next page. So we should do, whenever there's a search query, we have to reset the page back to 1. Because now if we do awesome, we can see that we have awesome this, awesome that, awesome this, awesome that. So whenever we paginate and then do awesome, there's actually only one page. So to fix that, we need to say in search query, when this updates, we have to say this.page equals 1. See if that works. So let's go to page 2. Let's clear out the search first. Go to page 2 and then we say awesome. And now you can see that it's on the first page and it knows not to continue because it has all the posts. So we fixed that little bug. And then lastly, we want to add the category check. So when we select this. We want to see the categories that actually exist, and you can see that I've created a few of them in the content. So this is coding, this is coding, life, coding, misc, life, coding. So a lot more coding posts, and that's what I expect this blog to be. Right, so we want to see life, misc, coding, and all in this. And how do we do that? So I was talking about efficiency in the part where we fetch the post. So in order to get all the categories, there is a bit of inefficiency going on, but we are sort of overcoming that by making it asynchronous. And it's so fast that you won't really notice it until you start getting like millions of pages. And then you could rethink about how you actually store your categories and stuff, because you might want to actually physically store some stuff on a database or something like that. But let's think about how to get categories. So in Nuxt we have the fetch method, which I will use for this. So in below data we'll add an async fetch, and we actually don't even need to make it async because we don't want it to block the view. And that's the thing about, you know, performance, is like we don't want to block the entire blog just because we can't load categories. So we'll rather hide the category dropdown until we have all the categories. So users won't be able to select categories yet, but they'll be able to read posts. But up to like a few 100,000 posts probably, it will be so quick that you probably won't even have a long waiting time to see the categories drop down. So what we have to do here is to do this.content, and then the only thing we really want, so we want to save some memory, is the category, and we also want to fetch that obviously. And because it's not async, we have to do a then, and then we have these categories. And what we want to do then, we should add another property over here called categories, which is just going to be an empty array for now. And then when we get the categories, what we'll do is we'll say this.categories equals an array which has all and the rest of those categories, right? But we don't actually want to give it all the category, because categories would have some extra props that content puts on there. So what we want to do is create a new payload, and there's also the chance that you have many posts with the same category. So if you just use the categories just like that, then you'll have repeating categories. So we basically want to filter out duplicates, and the way I'm doing that is just to use array.from and then create a new set, and the set will be based on categories .map category. All we want is the c.category. So basically what this is doing, let's spread the payload. So basically what this is doing, it's creating an array from a set, and a set is not allowed to have duplicates. So if I pass a set an array that has duplicates, and I can be 100% sure that this array is only plain strings, and if it has duplicates, the set will remove it, and then I convert it back to an array just so that I can do array methods and stuff on it if I have to. So now we can be sure that the categories are all, it's only if there's duplicates, it's been removed, and it includes an all. So that's what we need to do to fetch the categories. So to display them, instead of giving it this hard-coded items, we can give it the categories. But we don't really want to show these categories if it's not loaded yet. So we can add a v-if on here, and we can say only if there's categories.length. And we might even also just show the all category while the rest are loading, but I think that might be a better approach. But for now, let's just hide the entire thing if there isn't what's happening if there isn't categories.length. So if categories is an empty array, then we know there's no categories. Yeah, so I guess another option, so let's just see how that performs. We can go to the application again, and you can see we have the actual categories: all, coding, miscellaneous, live. So if I select coding, I should only have coding, which should be less. You can see that's a few less. Oh wait, no, I'm not even looking at that anymore, so I'm not filtering by the category, so it will always be the same amount. So that's what we need to do next, is actually restrict the data that we're fetching to the category. And how do we do that? Again, we need a method to call content. And this is where I said that we have to manipulate the query a little bit. So in fetch post, we're going to create a base fetch, because we have like sort of conditional requests, and the base fetch is basically the limit and the sort by, because we always want to do this. We always want to limit and we always want to sort. So the base fetch would be that. And then we can remove, or we can move this fetch post. So then we can do if, because if it's all, then we don't want to pass the category just like that. We want to just do a normal fetch. So if the this.category is equal to all, we need to fetch all the items. So we can say base fetch equals base fetch dot where. Oh, sorry, I have to check if it's not equals to all. So if it's something else than all, we have to add this where clause to say, like, let's compare some stuff. So we have to say where category is this.category. So only get the items where the category matches, and only do this if it's not equal to all. Else, the base fetch just stays as it is, and then we can say await the, or we can say const fetched posts equals await, and then we still need to do all the rest of this stuff. So we have to say the base fetch, which could be, so now we shouldn't add the function call now because we're already doing that over here. So we're just using this base fetch, which either has a where clause now or not, depending on what the category selection is. And we're awaiting that. So I'll put that on this line. And we're searching on the query. So that means even if we have a category selected and we search at the same time, both those conditions would be fine, and the limit would be fine, and everything would still work as expected. So let's save that, and we can go back to the app. Some errors. Base fetch is a constant. You cannot mutate a constant. So we have to do let base fetch. And we have to refresh. This refresh thing is just because we're developing locally and there's async data and it's hot module reload and all that stuff, but it won't happen when your site is live. Okay, so let's try it. Let's do live. I know live didn't have a lot. We should probably also watch this .category. Yeah, because how would the app know if it's changing? So we have to check if the category changes. All we have to do is fetch the post. So we don't even have to check the value because we are checking the category inside the function. So we can do await this.fetch post. And what we need to do is give it the search query, because we could have a search active while we're changing the categories. So if we don't pass the query and there is an active query, then it will be null, so it won't really make sense. So we need to give it the search query, and then we have another issue is because it needs to be async. And I guess we can just stay consistent and do await. So if category changes, await the fetch posts, and we don't need to, it doesn't need to know about the category, or we don't need. Should we change the page? I think so. I think we should go back to page 1. If you're changing my categories, you're going back to page 1. Let's just have to deal with that. All right. So now we have the ability to search. Let's see if we can do coding. You saw like some of the posts changed, and we should have less now. That's 8, and it's not skipping anymore. That's great. Life has a few less, so it only has 3. And I should be able to search while categories are there. So let's do boring, which works. So search is active and category. So if I change to another category which doesn't have boring, then there's nothing there. So in this case, we might want to show a message, and that we'll get to that next. So if I go back to life, we'll see that's boring. We'll go to misc, nothing, coding, nothing, all. Did I break it? All right, there's something going on with all. If I clear this, right, so we have to check out what's going on with all and not. So the base fetch only needs to limit, and then first we get where, and then we do that. All right, so I think this await might be causing some issues. Limit this dot limit, and if this dot, there we go. Category, and sorry for all of you that had to bear through that bug. Let's see now. So if I go to coding, back to all, great. So if I do, what was it, boring? So in all it should show, coding nothing, misc nothing, and in life it should show. And it's the only post. So to clear that, I have to clear this, and now we have all the posts again. Great, so next step, what do I want to do? Oh, if the search, so let's say X, if this is empty, we want to show just a little message saying there's no posts. Let's go do that. I'm actually just gonna copy this and put it right above, yeah, a new row that has a 12 columns. If there's no post.length, no post found yet, and I have to use that emoji trick, otherwise Chrome is breaking for me. And then if there are, you can do a v else, then we show the categories. So let's see what that looks like. Let's do X again, no post found yet, and we don't really need these buttons. So let's clear that out and go back to the buttons, and we can just say vif categories dot length. So only show the next or previous if there are actually categories on the page, otherwise it doesn't really make sense. This one, let's do X again, and there's nothing, but this is still showing. It's not categories.length, it's posts.length. I think I'm getting tired. Right. Right, so now the buttons are gone. So technically, that's all, folks. But there's one crucial step. If we write a blog, the internet needs to know about us and our blog. And currently we are being known as Nuxt Content tutorial dash Nuxt Content tutorial. And if we read something, that doesn't change. So SEO is pretty bad. So we need to add some SEO. And firstly, what we want to do is add SEO on the site itself. So you can add, I'm going to remove this title template and just add Kaizen's blog. With a cup of coffee, because that's what I feel like now. And in the name description, we can do writing about Nuxt.js. And you want to be more creative, and you can add like your social tags and stuff. But the Nuxt Content page has nice little snippets for us. But let me do it from scratch so that I can talk you through it. But I'm pretty sure you probably know about social tags. So that covers the site. So let's look at the site now. If we reload, we should have a new Kaizen's blog with a cup of coffee. And now what we want to do is in every post, we need to have SEO available on the page. And this needs to be generated on like physically when we build the site so that the bots can actually crawl it. And we'll do this in the slug page. And so we have this async data, and at that point we actually have a post available. So we have data about the post. So now what we can do is create a head function, and in this head function return a title, and we can say this.post.title, and we can add some other meta tags. So I'm going to copy paste these because they're a little bit lengthy. Description. Yeah, so here we go. Paste that in there. And this description is actually a typo because it needs to be inside the meta. So we have the title of the page, we have the meta, and which is description, this.post.description, and then we have the open graph details for Facebook stuff, and then we have the Twitter card details. And maybe in the next video I'll show you how to use images in your post, and maybe how you can add a cover image and use that cover image in here so that you actually have physical images on your social links. But for now, this will be findable by the Google people, and you can update sort of your fav icon and stuff like that. That's pretty simple. Let me just show you how to do that. In Nuxt.config, you go to this link and you'll see rel icon, and just replace this with your icon. So yeah, that's pretty simple. And then we can go back and look at the posts, read the post. So you can see this post was created the 13th. It's a very descriptive title. And if we do a view page source to see it the way the bots see it, and my eyes explode from the whiteness, you'll see in description, take your blogging to the next level with this tutorial. Everything is there, it's rendered, and it would be findable by the bots. So, my friends, I think we have come to the final stages of this blog. Let's see the resizing. You can see this is what it will look like on sort of mobile-ish. Not bad. Got a few posts. You can go next, you can go previous. You can go to a post, full page post. You have a next post and a previous post. So this looks like a nice sort of coding tutorial that I'll read in bed and then go back. And there we have it. Why did this all of a sudden go? Did I zoom in? Yeah, I did. All right. So that's basically, I think that's it. The final, the pièce la résistance is to deploy this thing. And I just want to see if I can actually show you my actions without exposing anything. I think I can show you. I hope I can show you. Okay, so all we have to do now is say git add dot git commit -m rocket be free my children, and then git push, and this is literally going to deploy. As soon as you do git push to the branch that you set up, you will be sending your code out to the world to see. So every time, I'm not going to push now, every time you want to release a new blog post, you don't need a CMS, you don't need to log into your CMS like on WordPress, or you have to create a dashboard page with auth and you have to remember passwords and you have a risk of being hacked and all your content being sort of, you know, generated and people getting access to your website's content. This way, you're creating your stuff locally on your computer, you git pushing it, and it's being deployed statically. There's no sort of login page, admin page. It's just static content out there for the world to see. Very secure, very quick. So you might want to have like a editor or something like that if you're not comfortable with MD, but you could always find an online editor and export your post as MD and just paste it inside an MD file and then deploy it. But there's options like that. I just think this is a very easy, quick way to get a blog set up. Every time you write a post, git add, git commit, git push, and you can even do something like a work in progress. So you can say published false, and as long as something's false, it will never show. It will never even generate into your code. It will just be there in the nether world, and all you have to do is in the async data say where published equals true, and it will never generate your code. So there's all kinds of fun things that you can do, but without further ado, let's take this to the web. And that's it. Go on with your day. Go have coffee. Go write a new post. Go think of something else to write while your GitHub action is running. Let's see if I can show you this. I think this will be fine. So yeah, so this is the process that's being run, and you find it in your repo under actions. You can see there's a setup job. It's running actions. Now it's installing dependencies. You can see all the dependencies that it's installing. And unfortunately, it has to do this every time you deploy, but you're not going to sit here and watch it every time. Just give it like a few minutes and it should be fine. Dependencies are installed. 26 seconds. Now it's generating your new site. This one might take a while. Site generated. Let's see how long it takes. So it's been 3 seconds, 1 second. So that's 30 seconds, 1 minute and 7 seconds. So it takes you about 2 minutes to deploy your site through GitHub. The other option you obviously also have is to deploy it in your own local code. So you could just add the Firebase CLI and then do yarn generate and Firebase deploy -- only hosting. This command will do the same thing from your machine. I just think there's more control if you use version control, because you can make this branch require pull requests so that you can review. So let's say you have a team working on this, and not everyone is allowed to log into your Firebase account. They just fork the code over and then generate a pull request with a new post. Then as soon as you accept that pull request, then you can deploy it. So you don't have to physically bring it down to your PC, review it, and then do yarn generate and Firebase deploy. You can just review it on GitHub, accept the merge request, and boom, it deploys. So that's some drawbacks. And where is that? Oh yeah. So the job is completed. So that means that we should be able to go to this URL. And there's our blog. Everything else is exactly the same, but this is my actual live one that I might actually continue building with some more features like views, which will then require a database and some other stuff. But that's the beauty of Nuxt Content. You can write your content and do logic in it as well, because in later videos you'll see that inside content you can actually write view components as well. So we'll take a dive into that, because that's really interesting that you can embed view components inside your posts and maybe add like stars or ratings or comments or something like that. So I guess I've been rambling on too long. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and hopefully this trend continues and I won't be disappearing for another year. And I'll talk to you guys later. Cheers.